What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason and Joe here. Deep Dive Week 1973, my new favorite thing to do on the channel. We started doing these last year. Gives us a chance to listen to a ton of stuff, revisit old favorites, and finally score them properly and dig into stuff that we're less familiar with. We spent a couple months doing this. I ended up listening to more than any other deep dive for 73. I got a couple over 250, so yeah, I listened to a lot. Um, at the same time, though, these 70s years have those classics that you almost have to put on your top 25. So you listen to a ton of music and it still feels a little limiting. So, anyways, we're each going to give our own top 25 in separate videos and our own top 25 songs as well. This is my top 25 albums, so I'm going to go first. Now that Cram is out of the fold, one of us has to kind of play Cram, and he would definitely be the one looking for predictions ahead of time. So, looking at my list, I'm gonna see if I can come up with how many I think you also have. I'm gonna say we probably have. I'm gonna guess 13.
13. Let me look at my top 25 here. I'm gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna assume everything on your top 25 is 4.5 stars and above. Maybe
Yep.
one. Wow, okay, so um
Yeah, I think I have a few maybe 4 or 5, 4.5s missing the list. So
okay. I'm gonna say 10 in common. I don't think we're gonna have quite as many as you think.
all right. Well, you will know, but we'll save it for your video for the reveal. Here we go. My number 25. This was tough. The last spot's always the hardest to figure out what makes it. My number 25 is Stranded by Roxy Music. This was a big year for Roxy Music. You got two albums plus a Brian Ferry solo album, and I really love the Brian Ferry solo album. It is one of my favorite covers albums of all time. It's my number 26, honestly. It just missed. It came down to like, do I put a covers album or the original material? I like them about equally, so I went with the one that has original material. But man, I like both a lot. Yeah, it's just a great album. It's my number two Roxy Music album, if you recall back to Roxy Music Week. It's the first without Eno. Slightly experimental, but better songwriting. I love Street Life, Amazona, Mother of Pearl. Some of their best songs, tons of energy, a lot of fun. So, got to be there. 24, I've got Countdown to Ecstasy by Steely Dan, my favorite Dan record, placing slightly lower than Can't Buy a Thrill did in 72, but I think 72 is a stronger year, so I don't know how the math really works on that, but that's the sort of thing that happens when you make a lot of lists. I don't know. It's to me, it's just like their most rocking album. It's probably the most fun of their albums. Maybe not quite as sophisticated as the later stuff, and you get into the Larry Carlton years, and but the guitar playing here is still phenomenal. It's really exciting. It's energized. Bodhisattva is awesome. My Old School, Pearl of the Quarter, just great, great stuff. Number 23, a discovery from earlier in the days of this channel. I have Roadmaster by Gene Clark. Joe will be happy to hear. Although I wonder if that one makes it for you. This one is a kind of a collection of songs. It's a studio album, but it's also compiled from several different sessions. It creates a slightly disjointed album, but it's full of really, really great songs and really great performances and players and Sneaky Pete and Spooner Oldham, Chris Etheridge, Clarence White, just a killer band on most of these tracks. And then you get a couple of tracks that were released, I think, or it was an unreleased single, but it's actually the Byrds lineup appearing on the first few tracks on this record from their kind of failed reunion in 70. Was that 73 also? I think it was. Anyways, just really emotive vocals all over this album. Really shows Gene to be one of the most underrated and overlooked talents of the late 60s, early 70s. I love the remake on this record of She Don't Care About Time as well. In a similar vein, my number 22 is GP by Graham Parsons. Speaking of former birds, his first solo album following his time in the Flying Burrito Brothers. This one's a little bit maybe more traditional country than the Burritos stuff, but a great mix of well-curated covers and originals. And another album with just the most incredible players. You got Ron Tutt, James Burton, Buddy Emmons, Al Perkins, Rick Gretsch. And then, of course, Emmylou Harris, who had put out a solo album at this point, but she was pretty much an unknown. And this kind of introduced her to the world as well.
Well, so far I love your list, and I really wouldn't change much at all. I have a feeling it's not going to stay that way forever, but so far I'm impressed with 73 in your list.
All right, see if I can stay in Joe's good graces a little longer here. My number 21 is Hard Nosed the Highway by Van Morrison. I didn't know this album really, and I'm not sure if I even knew any of the songs. Maybe I was familiar with Warm Love. I don't even know. That one seems kind of familiar. But it just continues his winning streak. In fact, I think this record is even a little better than the 1972's St. Dominic's Preview, which I had at 4 stars. This one I have at 4.5. It's pretty much what you would expect from 70s Van. It's got Van doing his Van thing with a great backing band, his signature jazzy R&B soul pop thing. And I feel like I always underestimate Van. I forget about him when considering my favorite vocalists and favorite albums of this era. But every time I put him on, he's just got such incredible delivery, so much feeling. He's a really tasteful singer as well. I think he makes really tasteful decisions, both in his singing and just in the arranging and production of his records. And this one's no different. Very good record. Number 20, I'm going with Desperado by the Eagles, my favorite Eagles album. And I would imagine probably as we deep dive other years, this will be the only one that's able to crack a top 25 for its release year. I like this significantly more than any other Eagles album. Love the opener, Dolan Dalton. I think it's incredible, probably their most underrated song. They just nail everything here. I love this lineup of the band with Meisner and Bernie Ledden. I love the loose concept, the outlaw thing that they're going for here. And I think they were a great country rock band at this time. And the more and more they tried to be like a rock band, I feel like the less successful they were. Commercially, they were more successful, but artistically, probably less successful. Great songs here. Tequila Sunrise is great. Title track is phenomenal. Meisner's Certain Kind of Fool was fantastic. I think he was a really underutilized secret weapon. Outlaw Man, great country rock with awesome harmonies. And it's interesting, as revered and classic as the title track is, I think this album is really underappreciated. I think that's kind of like the only song that really seems to exist outside of the album in the real world, but the record's great. I love it. How am I doing, Joe? Am I still okay?
Still pretty good. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that Van Morrison album on a lot of lists. I've heard a lot of people sort of poo-poo and talk down upon it. But I actually own that one, and I know it was my mom's. Well, my mom gave it to me. She really liked that one. So I've heard it before, but I didn't, spoiler alert, re-listen to it for this deep dive because I kind of
Interesting.
forgot. You just forget about Van Morrison in the 70s. He's
Yeah, I
there.
don't
He's
know.
an album like every year, and you just kind of forget that he exists.
Yeah. All right. Well, number 19, I think I recall you saying you enjoyed this in the Discord. I believe you listened to it. I've got I Knew Jesus Before He Was a Star by Glenn Campbell, number 19. One of my favorite new discoveries of the deep dive is this album. This is not a highly touted Glenn Campbell record, but I think it's just incredible. A perfect blending of country, kind of 60s LA Wrecking Crew sound, 70s soft rock, a little pop in there. You got Glenn, obviously, great player, singer, James Burton, Carol Kay, Hal Blaine, Robert Ross, Larry Mahobrick. I think that's how you say his name. But it's kind of like a merging. It's like half Wrecking Crew, half former Elvis band. And I think it works super well. Just blew me away. I think the songs are great. again, Glenn's vocal performances are great. I don't think he wrote a lot of the songs on here, but they're just great versions of good tunes. Number 18, keep going with some Joe Core, Inner Visions by Stevie Wonder. Maybe low for some people at 18. But as a reminder, this was only my number 4 Stevie Wonder record on our albums ranked list. So for me, not quite peak Stevie, but still a lot of amazing songs. I think he's getting more and more experimental with the synths on this record, which is really cool. His lyrics are getting a little more socially conscious at this point as well. Vocals and musicianship are off the charts, of course. It's got some big hits, Living for the City, Higher Ground, Don't You Worry About a Thing, but also some incredible deep cuts. Probably my favorite track on the record is Golden Lady. I also really like Visions with it's just kind of a hauntingly beautiful song, kind of different. And yeah, it's Stevie, so it's great.
I didn't know if that one was gonna make it. I was like, is he gonna put that on there? Because it was, yeah, your fourth, and I couldn't remember if it was 4.5 stars or not. So it's such a high bar for these years. I wouldn't have been too surprised if you left it off, but it's good that you got it on there.
Right. Number 17, Buckingham Nicks. Obviously, I've been aware of this record forever, but it's often been out of print. It might still be out of print, I'm not sure. And it's not on streaming. So I never actually heard this record before. I listened to it through YouTube. And I'm not sure what I expected, but this far exceeded what I thought it would be. It when you hear it, it makes total sense that this would be the album that the studio, used to demo their facility to Mick Fleetwood when he stopped by, which is how he heard them because it's a phenomenal sounding record. It sounds absolutely amazing. I guess in my mind, I figured it was just like them in development and younger versions and less polished, but this is basically what you get with Fleetwood Mac. It sounds just amazing, like I said. Pretty much as good as the subsequent Fleetwood Mac records. Great players. You got Jim Keltner and Waddy Wachtel and Ron Tutt and Jorge Calderon. And so, I mean, you got top-notch players here produced by Keith Olsen, who would go on to produce the uh the first self-titled 75 Fleetwood Mac record. Songs are great, really solid. You don't quite get those mega hits, obviously, that you would get on the Fleetwood Mac stuff, but it's really not that big of a step down. It does not feel like a developmental period. They are just already great. Number 16, this may be a surprise for some people. I've got The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get by Joe Walsh, which opens with the classic rock radio staple Rocky Mountain Way, which is great, but I think that track barely scratches the surface of all the fantastic and varied styles on this record. You get you get that track, obviously, which is a good just straight ahead rocker. You also get like spacey, psychedelic stuff, synth-filled jams, moody acoustic pieces, Latin rhythms, progressive excursions. It's all over the place and it's really well done. And I don't know really why this record doesn't get talked about more. I feel like a little bit Joe Walsh is kind of thought of as uncool because of his association and involvement with the Eagles. I think his critical standing solo wise takes a hit because of it, and I think that's maybe a little unfair. I think he's a great guitar player. Okay, my number 15 is another one that I don't expect to see on many lists, but I think it's great. I've got Still Alive and Well by Johnny Winter, hugely underrated guitarist, and I feel like more and more underrated as the years go by. I feel like he's kind of just like slipping out of people's minds. You don't really hear him on the radio anymore, and every new great guitar player that comes around is just like another spot on the list of greats that he drops. So uh, yeah, I want to talk about him. I think he's amazing, incredible blues player, incredible rock player, a perfect blend of blues and rock without really losing any authenticity in either direction. I think he is a completely authentic, incredible blues player, but he's also a fantastic rock guitarist. His tone on this record is just insane. He is ripping through these songs with like crazy abandon. He plays that Firebird too, which is so cool and different and just has a unique sound. And His voice, I think, is super, like, it's good. It's really cool. It's kind of like Stevie Ray Vaughan, where it just fits what he's doing so well, even though it's maybe not the most technically great voice. And yeah, it's just full of great songs. I think he is one of the all-time great guitar players. Number 14, I have Aladdin Sane by David Bowie, a great record, probably Bowie's glammiest record. You get all the glitter of Watch That Man and Driving Saturday and Panic in Detroit and The Gene Genie. But in the middle of all of that, you also get the haunting and kind of mysterious title track and the closer, Lady Grinning Soul, which is kind of dark as well. It's almost as if like the Ziggy persona is splitting into two halves on this record right in front of you. But the tunes are great. The band is great. It's really punchy and muscular sounding. I think way more so than Ziggy Stardust. The recording is really good. Um, but I do think it's ever so slightly less captivating of a record than the predecessor. Still great. One of his best from an artist with so many great albums. Number 13 on my list is a semi-new discovery. I've got the self-titled album by Duncan Brown. This one, I came across Duncan Brown when we were doing our Obscure Songs of the 70s video. And I was just kind of like digging around online looking for stuff, and I found a track from him that I liked a lot. I didn't really get around to the full record listen until the deep dive, so I was pleased to find out that the entire record is as good as that song. Perhaps not the Brown with an E that people expected on my list. Spoiler, no Jackson Brown coming up. He is one of the 4.5s that missed my list. But yeah, Duncan Brown, he would go on after this several years later to form the band Metro. This is his second solo album produced by Mickey Most. And I just think it's the most gorgeous, like English folk embellished with occasional little touches of like progressive rock and synthesizer, but mostly it's acoustic guitar and voice. I love his voice. I love his guitar playing, nylon string kind of flamenco style at times. My Only Son, phenomenal song. That's the one I found earlier, but also Cast No Shadows, great. Over the Reef, My Old Friends, just gorgeous tunes. If you don't know it, check it out.
Well, you started off strong, and now you're kind of going off the rails with some of this. Joe Walsh, Johnny Winter, Buckingham Nicks, Duncan Brown, Glenn Campbell. It's a great pick. Very off the. I don't think there's anyone on earth who has that album in their top 25 for 1973, but that is a very cool album, and he is just always underrated. I don't know about Johnny Winter. Haven't really got into him much. Joe Walsh. I don't know. He kind of seems like I think maybe the Eagles Association hurts him, but all of his hits were also kind of gimmicky a little bit. Like Rocky Mountain Way, it's like, oh, it's the talk box guy, and Life's Been Good to Me So Far. It's like, oh, it's the funny haha celebrity song. So I think that probably hurts him a little bit as well. Like you don't hear anything else other than those sort of fun, but I don't know, not especially deep songs. I don't know.
I get that. I can see that. But did you listen to that record?
No, I didn't.
It's great. Hey, I wanted to take a quick intermission from the list to let everybody know that the next deep dive that we are going to be doing on the channel is going to be 1984. And those videos will be coming hopefully sometime in March. So you've got a good bit of time if you want to listen along with us and play along. And if you want to make the playing along part even more fun, consider joining our Discord, which you can get to through our Patreon. Only $1 a month gets you on the Discord. A lot of people there that watch the channel that have similar tastes, different tastes, unique tastes. They can give you a lot of great recommendations. You can recommend stuff to them. Chat about the stuff you've listened to, what you liked, what you didn't like. It's a lot of fun. Hope you'll consider, and we will see you in 1984. All right, well, I'm running out of room for my fun picks, so getting up to the classics only territory here. Number 12 is Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton. We've discussed this record a lot on the channel at this point. We did his discography this year. One of the great double albums, so many great songs. Elton's band is kind of starting to hit their peak here on this record. Amazing performances throughout by everybody. And it's maybe not a perfect album, but it is uh, good enough easily, I think, to justify being a double album. There's no need to cut anything from here, really. And yeah, fantastic stuff. All right. Number 11 starts my 5 stars. And at number 11, I have Tanks by T-Rex. Hugely underrated record, I think. For many T-Rex fans, T-Rex is really just Electric Warrior and the slider, and that's pretty much it. But I'd argue that Tanks is nearly as good as those records, and I think it's even a little better than Electric Warrior. Oddly, the record had no single, and instead it was preceded by 2 weeks by the standalone single 20th Century Boy. And I think the fact that 20th Century Boy is not on it probably hurts it in people's minds. But man, I love the songs that are on it. You start to get some touches of R&B coming in, which he would do a lot more in subsequent records, but you get just a little dabble of it here. Some great sax on some songs. A slightly darker sound, I think, than on the slider. Not quite as over the top and in your face and glammy. Mr. Mister's great. Broken Hearted Blues is, I think, a beautiful tune. Electric Slim and the Factory Hen is great. Life is Strange, all great stuff. I like that record a whole lot. Okay, number 10. This is a record that I think people are, even at number 10, are going to be disappointed that I have it this low, but it is Dark Side of the Moon. And, I understand it's kind of a low placement. And I don't know, it's just this is always every time I talk about this record, I say how hard of a record it is to talk about because it's like on one hand, I know it's amazing. Every time I listen to it, I'm like, God, this is so amazing. This is so good. Um, but on the other hand, it's never something I really go for. I never like put it on unless I need to or I'm listening to it for a particular reason. So it's kind of like I don't know. It's hard to put it too high because I don't really have that like strong personal connection with it for whatever reason. I'm not really sure exactly why it doesn't draw me to it the way other records on this list do. But without a doubt, I mean, I wouldn't argue anything less than great. I think it is one of the greatest achievements of human beings as far as like recorded sound goes. Like it sounds so good. The engineering is like beyond amazing. And talk about like album feel and cohesion, just like one of the great examples of a band of people working towards a singular vision. It's amazing. So, yeah, it's 5 stars. It's in the top 10, but only number 10
For whatever reason, I didn't think you were going to have that on the list.
at all. Come on.
Yeah.
It was my
I
number one, Pink Floyd. Or no, it wasn't. What was?
it
Was
must
it?
have been. Nothing else could have been because you don't like Wish You Were
Uh,
Here.
it was Cram's number one. I don't know if I went number one with it or not. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I guess I was mixing it up with Wish You Were Here, or I just thought you didn't like Pink Floyd at all.
No, I
Like,
do.
okay, all right.
Yeah. All right, number 9 is one that I do very much have a personal connection to and an artist that I love a lot, and it is A Wizard, a True Star by Todd Rundgren. A truly just wild, off-the-wall album. And considering what it follows, some might even call it insane, kind of artistic commercial suicide, I guess you would say. This is the moment that you kind of had to realize Todd wasn't playing by anyone else's rules. It's just a roller coaster of brilliant pop, crushing hard rock, sound collage, musical theater, Philly soul, dream sequences, studio fuckery, and general weirdness delivered in a stream of consciousness style with each song running into each other. And if you haven't heard it, it's check it out. It's crazy and fun, and there's some great songs in there along the way. Number 8, controversial pick. My number 8 is Red Rose Speedway by Paul McCartney and Wings. And it's basically a tie with the other one, which is coming up shortly. And I kind of went back and forth. Public opinion is that this is a much weaker record than the other one, and I do not agree with that at all. It does lack, the crazy highs of a song like Band on the Run, but I'd argue that this record is maybe more consistent. I think it is kind of more in line with that homespun feel of, the first McCartney record and Wildlife and Ram than it is with the kind of stadium rock stuff that followed. Big Barn Bed, I think is a great rocking opener. My Love, I think is just an amazing love song. I think it's great. It has one of the all-time great guitar solos on it as well. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I love Get on That Right Thing. I love One More Kiss, Single Pigeon, When the Night. I think these are all among the best solo McCartney songs that there are. I think it's a crazy underrated record. People need to give it another chance. It's great. All right, so that leads me to number 7. It's Band on the Run. The making of this record has to be one of the craziest like making of stories in the history of rock. Where they decide to go to Nigeria and the studio's like not finished, and then they get robbed, and the demos and music get stolen, and he has a run-in with Fela Kuti, who accuses him of stealing African music, and he has to play him what they've recorded to say like we're not copying you. It's just like what a mess. And then he gets back to England, and there's a telegram from the label saying, "Don't go. There's an outbreak of cholera." Uh, so pretty crazy. And then the fact that all that happened and the record turned out the way it did is just remarkable. I think it's distinctly different than all the previous like solo and Wings ventures up to that point. I don't know that it's necessarily more ambitious, and I don't know that he was really necessarily trying to make a more ambitious record, but it definitely feels a lot more grand than the kind of like uh domestic bliss type of records that he had been making prior to this. Band on the Run, just incredible song. Jet, amazing. Let Me Roll, it's great. Bluebird, 1985, great, great songs all throughout. Number 6, Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin. Uh, at best, still only my fourth or fifth favorite Led Zeppelin album. I definitely prefer the two prior records, and I definitely prefer the next record. So, I mean, imagine making 4 albums in a row and Houses of the Holy being the worst one. It's a truly amazing run that they were on. And, their sound had been expanding with every album that they had made, showing, more and more versatility. But I think this is the one that really kind of breaks them out of having any labels placed upon them. This is where they kind of like broke off in every direction imaginable. I love the opener. Song Remains the Same. I think is super underrated. Actually, one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. I think it's fantastic. Rain Song is gorgeous. Again, one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. Over the Hills and Far Away is one of the first songs I ever learned on guitar. Used to not really like the grunge, but now I love it. I think it's just a nasty groove. Uh, they're doing faux like pop reggae stuff and then following that with like one of the most haunting, weird rock songs ever with no quarter. I would not call it the most cohesive album ever, but somehow it all works together much better than it should, and I think it's awesome. Number 5, maybe surprising to people that I have this ahead of Zeppelin, but I've just always been fascinated with this record, and that is the debut record from Queen. I don't know, it's just really like unique sounding, even compared to the next couple Queen albums. I think there's just a really specific interesting sound to this one. It's just the right amount of unpolished. Like their sound isn't quite fully gelled together yet. Mercury's voice isn't quite even what it would become. And I don't know, at times on this record, he doesn't even really fully sound like himself. They were recording in good studios, but they were using like free time in off hours. So maybe that like hurt the quality of the record. But despite it not being great, it's actually, I think, better for its flaws. I think it has such a cool sound. The acoustic guitar sounds on this record, I think, are really interesting. The writing is cool. It's kind of folky at times, but then like also, kind of like oscillate back and forth between kind of folk rock and heavy hard rock. Doing All Right is great. My Fairy King, The Night Comes Down, Jesus, Liar, Great King Rat. Those are all among my favorite Queen songs ever. So I think I had this number 2. It is a 5-star record. 5 stars started at 11. I don't know if I made that clear, but Yeah, I love the Queen debut.
I've definitely been underrating the Queen debut. Listen to it with fresh ears for 73. Yeah, I always used to make fun of you and mock you for your placement of it, but I think you might be right, or at least closer to right than wrong. So,
Love to hear that. Number four is Sabbath's Bloody Sabbath. It's the record that kind of kicks off my favorite era of Sabbath. This three album run, starting with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, is what I would call my favorite. And it's a bit analogous to Houses of the Holy. I think this is where you really see like how limitless their ability is and their creativity is. The riffs have a little more musicality to them. The song construction's a little more intricate. Ozzy sounds phenomenal on this record. You get stuff like Fluff, which is like this nice quiet guitar piece. You get Who Are You with all the Rick Wakeman synth all over it, just adding different sides to the sound, giving them a little more dimension and depth. The left turns that some of these songs take are just amazing. I think there's this like perception or like assumption of Black Sabbath that is like, I don't know, people who don't listen to Sabbath feel like they know what Sabbath is. And if you have that idea and you haven't listened to Sabbath, you should listen to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, because I guarantee it is not what you expect and what you think Black Sabbath is. Number three did not make my original top five. It should have, and I am sorry. I already knew the record at the time. I owned it at the time, and I loved it at the time. I don't know why I didn't put it in. But it is Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye. And I feel completely comfortable saying that this is my favorite R&B album of all time. It is one of my favorite sounding albums of all time, just period, any genre. For as huge as the title track is, and as much as this is considered a classic album, I cannot believe how none of these other songs, except for Let's Get It On, really, I don't think I've ever heard any of them anywhere outside of the record. It's crazy to me, but they're all amazing. Um, Please Don't Stay, just what an incredible performance that is. If I Should Die Tonight is amazing. That trio of songs to open the record is like as good as any three songs to open any record ever, I think. Some of the best singing ever committed to tape. Come Get to This has like a classic 70s Motown feel to it a little bit. Distant Lover's great. You Sure Love to Ball is great. Just to Keep You Satisfied is great. It's all great. It is, I think, a perfect album pretty much. So number three of 1973.
wow, I'm surprised. I was getting nervous that it just was, oh, he's not going to have Let's Get It On the list entirely. He's dead to me. You totally redeem yourself with that placement.
Oh, I toyed with putting it number one. I almost did.
Ah,
Couldn't quite, but it's great.
earn my everlasting respect if you had.
But you will be happy to see that this is no longer number one. It was weird. Like I still feel like 73 doesn't have a clear standout winner for me. So it's always hard. Every time I look at 73, I put something different at the top. Last time it was what is now my number two, Closing Time by Tom Waits. My favorite Tom Waits album by a pretty wide margin. I love Waits as the piano balladeer, the troubadour. This kind of early part of his career, I think, is definitely my favorite era of his. I Hope I Don't Fall in Love with You is just, I think, one of the most perfectly written pieces of songwriting. I just think it's great, the way the lyrics work in that song. I think the greatness of this record lies in that marriage of like great songs, which there are, and then just the vibe of it, that kind of like smoky jazz club. He's just like this sad sack singer, drinking whiskey and singing these tunes. You know, Waits is almost like portraying this down on his luck character on this record, but it still feels authentic. It doesn't feel like he's like fully doing a character. I don't know. It just works really well. Yeah, it's great. I still love it, but it's now number two. I had to go with something that was a little more dear to my heart and something that I had lived with longer. And that, of course, is Mott by Mott the Hoople. After their breakthrough in 72 with All the Young Dudes, Hunter seemed to like unlock this new style of writing, just really dramatic and autobiographical. He's like kind of documenting his life in a rock and roll band on this. And I talked about in our recent Stones video how XL on Main Street is kind of like what it feels like to be in a band. And to me, Mott is a little bit of that, but it's also kind of like going back to your hotel room in a city that you don't know you're in, and just like being in your head and being like, what the hell is this that's happening? Some of the lyrics on here are so great. He's like writing about the band like directly and naming the other members of the band in the songs. It's just really cool, and the acknowledgement that yes, we're having like this moment right now where we're like this big huge band touring the world, but like understanding that that's fleeting and it may not last. And I don't know, I just think that the writing is really smart. And yeah, I've long considered myself a big fan of glam rock, but I've come to realize recently that it's only like the upper echelon acts of that genre that I really love. I saw Slade recently on the Midnight Special, and I thought it was so lame and corny and just like not very good at all. But with Mott, there's like that self-awareness and Ian's great writing that makes them so great. And they were giving you the show that you wanted, the same show maybe that Slade was giving you, but I think just their understanding and their self-awareness and the deepness of the songs and how smart it was just much more authentically cool than just putting on costumes.
Okay, so that's good. I'm glad we got closing time off the top. My greatest fear was that you were going to put Sabbath Bloody Sabbath at number one and then out metal me for a year. That would not be cool. Let's Get It On. You would have out maybe out R&B'd me there too. So that was number one. It's not my number one. Spoiler alert. So that would have been tough for me to take as well. But I think the closing time to Mott one. That's pretty Jason core. I'm comfortable with that.
All right, well, that's my list. Let me know what you think of it, and drop your own list if you'd like in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. That helps us out a lot. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you know when new videos drop. Joe's list will be coming soon, and our songs. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.